The two-story house nestled in the quiet residential neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago was the perfect love nest for Sophia Davis. Every morning when she woke up, her small happiness came from gazing at her husband David's sleeping face beside her. Even though 10 years had passed since their marriage, she still felt like they were newlyweds, probably because David remained the same gentle and thoughtful husband he had always been. Sophia worked as a pediatric nurse at the city's general hospital. The children's smiles were her driving force, and although she sometimes faced difficult realities, every time she saw her little patients recovering, she felt deeply grateful that she had chosen this profession. At the hospital, she was trusted by the families of her patients so much that she was affectionately called Angel Sophia. Meanwhile, David worked as an architect at an independent design firm. He was quiet and thoughtful, with a careful personality that always considered others' feelings before speaking. Unlike Sophia, David wasn't much of a talker, but his words carried weight. When he said, "I love you," he always looked into her eyes and spoke from his heart. The only regret in their married life was that they hadn't been blessed with children yet. Sophia worked with children every day, dreaming of the day she could hold her own baby. David also loved children, and whenever Sophia saw him playing with friends' kids, she was convinced that he would make a wonderful father. Every Sunday, the couple had a habit of visiting Sophia's parents' house. Her father, George Bennett, was devoted to his hobby of gardening. Though he had a strict personality, he loved his daughter deeply and doted on David like his own son. The two enjoyed playing golf together on weekends, and Sophia always felt reassured that she had chosen a good husband when she saw her father's happy expression whenever he talked about David. Her mother, Margaret Bennett, was actively involved in community volunteer work. She had a caring nature and always prepared plenty of homemade dishes whenever Sophia and David visited. The apple pie she made, especially for David, was exquisite, and he always said, "Mom's pie is the best" in the world, which delighted Margaret. At Sunday dinner tables, warm conversations always flowed. George would consult with David about work matters, and Margaret would listen to Sophia's stories about her experiences at the hospital. The four of them seemed bound by deep ties. Since David didn't have biological parents, the Bennetts were like real parents to him. "I hope we can see a grandchild's face someday," Margaret said softly while pouring tea, and Sophia smiled a little sadly. "That day will surely come, Mom," she said, her heart aching with longing. David gently pulled Sophia's shoulders close to him and whispered, "Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home?" "That's exactly what I did without its stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious." Sophia believed without doubt that this peaceful and happy daily life would continue forever. A loving husband, kind parents, and fulfilling work life seemed perfect to her. There was just one thing she knew almost nothing about: David's past. David had lost his parents at a young age and was raised in an institution. He didn't like to talk about the details, and Sophia never tried to force him to share. She understood that it was natural not to want to relive painful memories. She had no doubt that his current kindness and love were genuine. On an autumn evening, the two were snuggled together on the sofa, watching TV as usual. David gently stroked Sophia's hair and murmured, "I'm so glad I met you." Sophia turned to look into his eyes. She had noticed the shadow of deep sadness that sometimes appeared in those eyes, but she believed that her love would heal it. "Me too. When I'm with you, everything seems perfect," Sophia replied, and David showed a slightly complex expression, but soon smiled and embraced her. On a morning in October, Sophia stood in front of the bathroom sink, trembling as she held a small plastic test kit. She was afraid to see the result and stood still with her eyes closed for several seconds. Taking a deep breath, she slowly opened her eyes, and 2 blue lines appeared clearly. It was positive. "Really?" Sophia whispered softly to herself in the mirror. It was the moment she had waited for 12 years. Her hands were shaking so much that she almost dropped the test kit as she checked the result again. It was definitely positive. Tears streamed down her cheeks, tears of joy. That afternoon, after finishing her shift at the hospital, Sophia went straight to the gynecology clinic. Dr. Anderson, the attending physician, smiled warmly when she delivered the news. "Congratulations, Mrs. Davis. You're 8 weeks pregnant." "The baby is developing well," Sophia cried on the examination table. The small heartbeat she saw in the ultrasound deeply moved her. Though it was still only the size of a grain of rice, the sight of her child definitely existing there seemed like the most beautiful thing in the world. "The due date will be around June next year. Since it's in the early stages, you shouldn't overdo it, but you can continue your normal life," Dr. Anderson explained kindly. On the way home, Sophia whispered, "Thank you" several times in the car. It was gratitude to God, to fate, and to her beloved husband. As she thought about how to tell David, she decided to prepare a special dinner. At the supermarket, she bought David's favorite salmon and fresh vegetables, and immediately began cooking when she got home. She set the table with fine china, the same set they had received as wedding gifts but rarely used. In the center of the table, she placed a small bouquet of flowers. David came home around 7 in the evening, and as soon as he opened the front door, he was greeted by delicious aromas and warm light. His expression was one of surprise. "Was today some special day?" David asked while loosening his tie. "It's a special day, but I'll tell you the reason later." Sophia smiled meaningfully and had him sit at his place. During dinner, the two discussed workplace events as usual. David happily talked about how his design proposal for a new project had been adopted, and Sophia reported that a little patient she had been caring for would be able to leave the hospital. Sophia's heart was racing with nervousness as she served the ice cream cake for dessert. She took a deep breath and said, "David, I have something important to tell you." "What is it?" David stopped his spoon and looked at her with curiosity. Sophia stood up and brought a small box from the kitchen. Inside was a pregnancy test along with a small note that read, "Are you ready to be a daddy?" David opened the box and froze for a moment. He picked up the test kit and stared at it intently. "This is really..." His voice trembled. "It's real. I had it confirmed at the hospital today." 8 weeks, Sophia answered, tears in her voice. David slowly stood up from his chair and embraced Sophia. Tears were flowing down his cheeks, too. "I can't believe it. I really can't believe it," he repeated many times, burying his face in Sophia's hair. "Yes, we're going to be parents," Sophia said, gently stroking her husband's back. After the pregnancy announcement, the house seemed filled with joy. Sophia and David spent the next few days discussing baby names, planning for the future, and imagining their life together as parents. The news had brought a wave of happiness, but beneath it, Sophia could feel a slight sense of anxiety creeping in. The anticipation of being parents for the first time was a blessing, but the uncertainty of it all, of what the future would look like, how they would change, and how their lives would shift, was starting to sink in. The morning sickness was persistent, but Sophia didn't mind. It was a small price to pay for the miracle she had been dreaming of for so long. Every time she felt the waves of nausea, she reminded herself that it was a sign of the life growing inside her. But deep inside, she carried the fear of the unknown. Would she be a good mother? Would David be the kind of father he had always dreamed of being? A week after the announcement, the couple planned their usual Sunday visit to Sophia's parents' house. Sophia had carefully prepared a gift, a beautiful box containing small baby shoes wrapped in a ribbon. She was excited to see her parents' reactions and to finally share the news of the pregnancy with them. They had always been supportive, and she couldn't wait to see their faces when they realized they were about to become grandparents. In the car, Sophia felt David's hand resting on her knee, a small gesture of reassurance. "They're going to be thrilled," David said with a smile. "I hope so," Sophia replied, squeezing his hand in return. When they arrived at her parents' home, the house felt warm and inviting, just like always. Margaret greeted them with her usual warmth and led them inside. George, with his signature gruffness, came out of his study and embraced David in his usual hearty manner. They exchanged pleasantries, but there was something in the air today that felt different, an unspoken tension that Sophia couldn't quite place. Dinner was served and they all sat down at the table. Margaret had made her famous roast chicken, and the apple pie, of course Michael's favorite, was sitting proudly in the center. It was the picture of family life, and for a moment, everything seemed perfect. Before they began, Sophia pulled out the small box, carefully wrapped in delicate paper. "Mom, Dad, we have a present for you," she said with a playful smile, but her heart was pounding in her chest. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Margaret looked at the box with curiosity. "What's this?" she asked. Sophia handed her the box and Margaret untied the ribbon. When she opened it, the baby shoes were revealed. For a moment, Margaret stared at them, her eyes widening in surprise. Then slowly, her hand went to her mouth, and tears welled in her eyes. "Could it be?" she whispered, almost in disbelief. George stood up from his seat and with a trembling voice embraced Sophia. "Is this true?" he asked, his eyes bright with emotion. "Are you really?" Sophia nodded, smiling through her own tears. "Yes, Dad. You're going to be grandparents." For a moment, it seemed as though everything was perfect, the joy, the surprise, the love. But as Sophia looked at her parents, she noticed something in their eyes, something she hadn't expected. It wasn't just pure happiness. There was a flicker of something else, something unspoken, deep in their gazes. Margaret's smile was tinged with sadness, and George's expression, though filled with joy, carried an air of something unresolved. Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their reaction than she had anticipated. That night, after they had returned home, Sophia couldn't shake the uneasy feeling she had gotten from her parents' reaction. She had expected nothing but joy, but there had been something deeper that she couldn't place. She turned to David as they sat on the sofa. The lights dimmed, the quiet of the night wrapping around them. "What do you think?" she asked softly, leaning against him. David looked at her, his expression serious. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," she said, her voice tinged with confusion. "It's just, they seemed so happy, but there was something in their eyes. I can't explain it. I just thought they would be more at peace with the idea of becoming grandparents." David gently took her hand in his. "Maybe it's just that they're overwhelmed. You know how much they love you, and maybe this is a lot to process all at once. I wouldn't worry too much about it, but Sophia's mind wouldn't let it go. She kept replaying the scene in her head, wondering what could have caused her parents to react the way they did. The thoughts gnawed at her, but she couldn't find any answers. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. More doctor's appointments, work at the hospital, and small moments of happiness between her and David. But one Thursday morning, things took a dark turn. Sophia was at work when she received a call from Detective Johnson, the officer who had been investigating the accident. His voice was calm but urgent. "Mrs. Davis, we need you to come in for a few questions. There are some new developments regarding your husband's past." Sophia felt a cold chill run through her. The detective's voice sounded too serious, too somber. She immediately left the hospital, her heart racing. At the police station, Detective Johnson looked at her with a grave expression. He led her into a small room and closed the door behind them. "There's something we need to discuss regarding the car accident. It's about your husband, Michael." Sophia's mind spun with questions. What could this have to do with the accident? Was David involved in something she didn't know about? "Your husband's real name isn't Michael Davis," Detective Johnson said softly, and Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "His real name is Daniel Harrison," the detective continued, his tone heavy. "And 25 years ago, your parents were involved in an accident that killed his parents." The world seemed to spin around Sophia. The detective's words felt like a sharp blow to the chest. She shook her head, trying to process what he was saying. How is that possible?" she whispered, her mind racing to understand. Over the next several hours, Detective Johnson explained the shocking truth. Michael, now David, had changed his identity after surviving a horrific car crash that killed his parents. The Bennetts had been involved in that accident, and for years David had lived with the pain of losing his family and with the desire for revenge. However, As the years passed and he fell in love with Sophia, his bitterness and anger began to fade. His plans for revenge turned to love. He had chosen to live a life of peace with Sophia, even though the past still haunted him. As the detective finished telling the story, Sophia sat in stunned silence, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She had married a man who, unbeknownst to her, had lived a life filled with unimaginable pain and loss. Sophia's world was falling apart. Everything she had believed about her life, her marriage, and her husband had been shattered. The man she loved, the man she had built a life with, was not the person she had thought he was. The truth about his past, his real name, the loss of his parents, and the devastating accident involving her own family was a heavy burden that Sophia could barely comprehend. She sat in the sterile interrogation room, her mind racing with a million thoughts. How could David, Michael, have kept this from her for so long? Was it because of his love for her, or was it because he couldn't bear to bring up the pain of his past? As the minutes ticked by, Detective Johnson remained silent, giving her space to process the information. His presence, usually calm and authoritative, now felt almost too much for Sophia to bear. She needed time to think, to make sense of the complex web of lies and love that had ensnared her life. Later that evening, after the long day of revelations and confusion, Sophia found herself sitting alone at home. The silence of the house was deafening. David had not yet returned from work, but Sophia knew the moment he walked through that door, everything would change. She had so many questions, and she needed answers. When the door finally opened, it wasn't David's usual calm, comforting smile that greeted her. Instead, it was his face, pale, tense, and filled with guilt. He stood there for a moment, his eyes not meeting hers. "Sophia," he whispered. "David, we need to talk," Sophia said, her voice trembling but firm. She stood up slowly, her hands clenched at her sides. "About everything. I know the truth." David's face seemed to pale even further, and he dropped his briefcase onto the floor. "Sophia, I never wanted you to find out this way." Sophia took a deep breath, trying to hold her composure. "I want to hear it from you. I want to know why you kept it from me. The accident, your real name. Why didn't you tell me?" David slowly walked toward her and sat down, his face etched with pain. "I didn't want to bring that past into our life, into your life. I wanted to protect you from it, Sophia. I thought I could move past it. I thought that if I could love you enough, the pain would go away." Sophia's heart ached as she listened to him, the truth sinking deeper with each word. "And the revenge? What about the revenge you planned for my parents?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David closed his eyes, a single tear slipping down his cheek. "I never planned to hurt you. When I first met you, I was angry. I wanted to make them feel the pain I felt. But when I saw you, when I fell in love with you, I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't hurt you. I had to choose a different path. I wanted to be a better man for you." Sophia stood there in silence, her heart torn between the love she had for this man and the devastation of the truth. "But why, David? Why didn't you trust me with this? Why didn't you let me be a part of your pain?" David looked up at her, his eyes filled with regret. "I was afraid. Afraid that you wouldn't see me the same way. Afraid that you would leave me if you knew the truth." Sophia stood there, the weight of everything he had said pressing on her. She loved David. She had built a life with him. But now she found herself questioning everything. Could she truly forgive him for hiding such a significant part of his past? Could she move forward, knowing that their entire relationship had begun with revenge? "I don't know what to say, David," Sophia whispered, her voice breaking. "I need time to think. I need to figure out what this means for us." David's face fell and he stood up. "I understand, Sophia. Take all the time you need. I never wanted to hurt you." Sophia nodded, but her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She loved David, but the betrayal was so deep. She needed time to process everything. As David left her alone in their home, Sophia stood by the window, staring out into the night, wondering what the future would hold. Could love overcome all the lies, all the pain? Days passed, and though David gave her the space she had asked for, the distance between them grew. Sophia tried to go about her normal routine, but the knowledge of what she had learned consumed her every waking moment. The happiness she had once felt was now overshadowed by the uncertainty of their future. Then, one evening, just when she thought she couldn't take any more of the silence between them, David returned. This time he wasn't just asking for forgiveness, he was asking for a chance to rebuild everything. "Sophia, I love you," he said, his voice raw. "And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I am willing to do anything to make it right. Please let me prove to you that I can be the man you deserve." Sophia stood there, torn between the love she still felt for him and the anger that burned in her heart. "You've already proven that you love me, David. But I don't know if that's enough. I don't know if I can move forward with you after everything that's happened." David dropped to his knees, his voice trembling. "Please don't leave me. I've already lost so much. Don't take away the one thing I cherish more than anything." Sophia felt the tears welling up in her eyes. She had to make a decision. Could she forgive him? Could she build a new life with him despite the past? After a long silence, Sophia whispered, "I don't know, David, but I'm willing to try. For us, for the baby." The road ahead was uncertain, but as Sophia and David stood together, their hands intertwined, they knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. It wouldn't be easy, and the scars of the past would take time to heal, but they both understood that love, true love, was worth the fight. Sophia placed her hand on her belly, feeling the gentle movement of the baby inside her. This was the future they would build together, one step at a time. As they faced the challenges ahead, Sophia knew that love could overcome even the darkest of secrets, and with time, they would rebuild their family, stronger than ever before.